Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with our usual co-hosts, Brandon, Marianne, and Mike Tagliere, and we have a big episode this evening. A lot of Week 3 preseason action to get into. Obviously, the Tony Romo, and to a lesser extent, Ben Watson injuries, which both have very big ramifications. But first, folks, as usual, I like to ask a question to kick things off. I was telling Mike earlier I had my home league draft this weekend where we voted on a rule to where the winner and the loser got to split the food bill for next year's draft, which many of your leagues have some rule about the loser and the winner. So, Mike, my first question to you, what does your home league do for the loser and or the winner?
We definitely have a tradition, and it's been for years where there's a busy intersection of the interstate.
Oh, no.
The interstate, okay, in Joliet, where we had them hold up a sign saying, "I'm standing here because I got finished last in my fantasy football league. Will not work for donations to my waiver wire fees." So basically, it was a laughing joke, and some of the guys actually make money out there from standing out there. Some people laugh, They pull up, they give money. Well, this year we had a cop pull up and and says, "Hey, you need to go. Like, you all cannot be here. Otherwise, if I come back and you're still here, you're gonna get a ticket." So we're trying to figure out.
Core, man.
Yeah, so basically we're trying to figure out if we should do something in the mall, where we should have them stand in the mall, because I don't think that would be illegal. But yeah, we definitely have done that every year for I think the last 5 years.
Wow. So you haven't had a police officer up until this year? I mean,
no, unfortunately, no. We've had the point where there's actually been a homeless person on the corner where we had to go on the other side of the interstate. So, because it's a really busy, intersection. So we've had to do that, but never had a cop kick us out. We've had cops laugh at us before, but nothing to say, "Hey, you need to go." So, unfortunately,
so never like a street fight with a homeless gentleman who was claiming that territory.
No.
Like you said, that's probably prime real estate for that kind of thing if it's a busy intersection.
Yes,
There's a lot of chains flying around there.
It really is, yeah.
Anyway, Brandon, what does your home league do?
None of that.
What? Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. I wish. Actually, I didn't even know people did that until I saw the league.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
that's a legit thing.
The Sacco's cool. Like, I'd like to win that. Like, So I got a little sad, but no, none of my home leagues have a last place thing. When you play with your family, it's just, we know my dad is bad.
Sure.
God love him. He's the only one who's played football on a collegiate level.
So you can speak freely. It's okay.
Exactly. No, he really doesn't. And that's the thing. He has 3 daughters who are fantasy analysts. And he got drunk the other day, and he was like, "Gotta go quarterback first."
Oh, no.
And then I told him.
Listen to this.
And I said, "Oh, you said that." He's like, "No, I didn't." I was like, "Wow, you were drunk." He never gets drunk. That's what's so hilarious. So it ends up that his subconscious is telling him. This is the kind of terrible things that he does. So we just know it's him.
That's okay. Yeah, we never had anything. We've had this league for 10 years, and we've heard of other leagues that did stuff like that. We just never did. But I think this year it was my dad, of all people, that brought up, "Hey, who's going to pay for the food next year?" And that's when we were like, oh, the loser should definitely split it with the winner. So, because look, the winner, we'll get some money and they can afford it. It's not a problem. But the loser's got to get something, right? And that's, you got to determine by points too. You can't go by record, because a lot of crazy stuff happens with head-to-head, and you got to do it by points, because that truly is the barometer of how bad a team is. You know what I mean? So, and we don't have a toilet bowl. I know several leagues have a tournament. Or a playoff at the end for the worst teams, which we don't do that either. So
we do that. You are in last place officially. It's a head-to-head, but you got to keep trying.
You got to give them something.
Yes.
What are they playing for? That's not pride. You got to make them.
Well, we got a trophy back here because I won it again.
The toilet bowl or the regular?
No, the regular one.
No, I'm saying.
I've never been last place in a league.
Okay, then there you go. You got to have the loser get something. They have to be reminded how bad they were. So.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Mine, that sign that they have to hold up on the expressway, it has to be on display in their house the entire year. Not somewhere, not in the corner.
Lord.
It has to be in their kitchen or in their living room, where they have it proudly displayed, and every now and then one of the league mates will go over and check at the house to make sure it's up.
That's hardcore, man. I didn't think you took it that far.
No, seriously.
It's a long reminder. Yeah. Wow.
I've never finished last in the league, but my wife, however, did. So it had to be on display in our house one year, and I was not happy about it.
I know. Like, what? I mean, she lives with you, Mike. How could she do that?
That's a good question. It's because I'm not going to be accused of collusion. That's why.
Wow. You are a fantasy football purist, Mike. I applaud you. That is hardcore. Me and my friends were also discussing, I don't know if you guys ever thought about this, but do you follow like the major soccer leagues around the world at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
So they have this thing called relegation, right? Because they've got like the varying leagues. So they got like the top league and then the next league and all that. So relegation is the bottom 3 teams of the league every year get relegated to like the league below them. And then the 3 teams in that league move up to the top league. So like it'd be like we really want to get to a point where we have enough teams that we can relegate teams for a year that are really bad, and that it's like a year-long punishment for being that bad.
That's awesome. I would love to have that.
I know. I'm telling you, you gotta start watching soccer more. But anyway, you would need a lot of teams for that, and you need a lot of people that were committed to that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I digress. So, but no, that's good. I hope everyone that had a draft this weekend thinks of something fun and interesting and all that crap. So, but now let's get to the serious business, folks. As we all probably saw, because they replayed it over and over again, Tony Romo broke a bone in his back over the weekend, which it looked bad when we saw it, and then it just was confirmed that it was just as bad as we thought it was. Depending on who you listen to, out maybe 6 weeks, out maybe 10 weeks, who really knows? But the bottom line is he's going to be out a while, and Dak Prescott time is here a lot sooner than we all thought it would be. So, Mike, first question to you. Are you aboard the Dak Prescott hype train?
Yeah, I don't think you can dismiss a quarterback playing behind that offensive line who can run the ball, who's played as well as Dak Prescott has during the preseason. There's definitely no dismissing kind of what he's done. In regards to the whole Tony Romo injury, I can actually comment on that more. I actually had a fractured vertebrae before. I used to deliver office furniture when I was right out of high school, and I would think I was only like 20 years old, maybe 21. I lifted a piece and I fractured a vertebrae. I had to go to I actually finished work that day. It really hurt. I felt it pop and it hurt real bad. Went home and my dad thought I had pulled a muscle, but it turned out, went to the ER, they took x-rays, and I had a fractured vertebrae, and the only way to fix it is to rest. There's no surgery that they could do to speed up Romo's recovery. It's just him resting, so I don't think they're going to rush him back to practice. I know some people are like, oh, he can return to practice. No. It's whenever he gets the rest and the doctor says that it's healed, he's ready to go. So I'm anticipating 6 to 8 weeks for Romo. That would be me personally. That's right around where I was ready to go back to work. And it was a physical job. So, but Prescott, I don't think that you can sit here and say that a guy who throws for 9.1 yards per attempt in the preseason, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Although, to be fair, he should have had an interception. The one touchdown to was it Jason Witten, I think. It should have been an interception, but Witten bailed him out. But still, he looks fantastic, and his rushing line of 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, that only adds to his rushing floor. So I think he's a QB2 with upside for QB1 potential and a good matchup.
Well, and just real quick on that note, so I looked up the Cowboys' schedule to start the season. They play the Giants, Redskins, Bears, and 49ers. Wow. So not exactly a tough schedule for old Dak Prescott to be playing in. What about you, Brandon? Is he on the quarterback 2 radar for you?
I don't know if he's quarterback 2, but I love him in daily format at the bare minimum, which is where he's at FanDuel. So, but that's going to be the chalkiest play you could possibly play in week 1. It's like made of chalk. They may just actually make his name white on the site so that you know it's chalk.
Or they may just like pre-populate everyone's rosters with him in there and just
right. You're welcome. Here's your gift from FanDuel. Yeah, no, it is what it is. I do like him. I think he will make some rookie mistakes. I think Ezekiel Elliott will make some rookie mistakes. I don't know if I love both of them being rookies back there, but I think if you believed Ezekiel Elliott was a first-round pick before, you definitely still believe it today because they're going to need to lean on the run. I don't think he's going to get as much work in the passing game, which he actually wasn't as involved with the passing game at Ohio State anyway. He had really good catch percentage, but he wasn't very involved. Actually, this sounds exactly like Alfred Morris, who's also a handcuff that you just have to have. But as far as Dak Prescott's concerned, I was actually more impressed with his performance at Seattle than I was with his 2 blockbuster performances before that. It was the first team defense. They did not scheme for him to be involved on that level. He went in there. He held his own. He didn't look flustered at all. And the way that he commanded the 2-minute offense at the end of the half was really beautiful and something that you don't see from rookie quarterbacks. So I feel very optimistic about him. I feel optimistic about Des Bryant. I think now he's going to drop in ADP, and I don't care. I'm still taking him. I think that he's still the number one guy. And actually, you know who else's value goes up to me? Jason Witten. And I think we saw that veteran leadership is something that both of those rookies are going to be leaning on, and especially with the short game. So, yeah, I actually went back and I looked at the tape, and I'm going to slightly disagree with Mike / add on to that. I think I told you guys the getting older story. I was with a coworker who was in his 30s when I was in my 20s, and he was complaining about the way he looked, and, you know, we were working retail. And I said, "You look great." And he was like, "I know. It just, yeah, it just takes longer." And that is what and as a woman in her 30s, it's true. Look great. It just takes longer. You know what else takes longer? Injuries. He's 36 years old, and he barely got touched and broke a vertebrae. If you look at that tackle, that could happen to anyone at any time. Not only are they not going to rush him back, but if Dak Prescott's killing it, there's a possibility they don't bring him back at all. If he is on your roster, you need to drop him. There is no reason to keep Tony Romo on your roster, even in the deepest of leagues, because if he hurt his back on that hit, I'm very concerned moving forward, and I wish him the best. This is not me being a Tony Romo hater. I am actually worried about him, and I want him to do well in life and walk. I mean, this is scary stuff, you guys. How many clavicle bones, backs, everything. It's tough stuff. So that's a little mini soapbox, but if you are someone that's already drafted and you have Tony Romo, I'm one of them, you know, I think it's time to really, really look elsewhere.
Yeah. I don't see any scenario where Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett say that, you know what, Tony, you're not going to come back as a starter and Prescott's going to be the guy. I don't see any scenario where that takes place because you're talking about a 6-game max. So it's like a 6-game sample size and they know they could win with Tony Romo. I think
it'll be up to full 10. I think it's full 10.
I don't know if it will be, but either way. So you were talking about Des Bryant. I think that this actually may increase Des Bryant's targets. Tony Romo is known to spread the ball around quite a bit, and so if anything, Dak Prescott he's going to lean on Des Bryant in the offense. We've seen him do it in the preseason games where he played with Des. They work just fine together. The thing that hurts Des a little bit is the touchdown potential. Tony Romo and Des Bryant have something special down at the goal line. It's almost like Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers. You know, that back shoulder fade that's coming to Jordy Nelson. Tony Romo knew how to throw that to Des Bryant. Those two had it timed down perfectly. That's my concern for Des. I think his touchdown regresses a little bit. And the same thing for Ezekiel Elliott. You know, I already had my touchdown concerns for Elliott on the goal line because Alfred Morris is going to be involved in some facet. They're not just going to let him sit on the bench and say, you're only going to play if something happens to Ezekiel Elliott. No, he's going to be involved in the game in short yardage situations, rightfully so. Alfred Morris has been great around the goal line in his career. So I have my touchdown concerns for Des Bryant and Ezekiel Elliott now that Prescott is taking over this offense, but in the long run, I'm not too concerned. I didn't move Des down at all. And then Ezekiel Elliott, he's still in those top 8 running backs for me.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the lesson here is it shouldn't, at least at the moment, affect our rankings for Des or Elliott. Because, look, Prescott's shown to be competent so far, and until he shows us otherwise, we have to assume that he's going to continue this. And, yeah, and I think you also hit on a good point, Brandon, which I've learned to just, call it the Brandon Lee, rookie tight end theory, where the tight ends are automatically bumped up if there's a rookie back there. And I didn't even think about this at the time, but, I mean, I think Witten will get a slight bump. I mean, that's not to say he's going to be over 1,000 yards like he was in the past, but I think they're going to, probably rely on him more than they probably had planned on it. And it's just going to happen naturally. I mean, Dak's just going to need a safety valve at some point. So, yeah, I think that can happen. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But, again, like you said, I think we have to just drop him for now. I mean, there's going to be plenty of other options out there, whether streaming or backup or what have you. So.
Well, I want to be clear, too, that I don't think that they're necessarily going to hold Tony Romo out of, spite or, because Dak Prescott's the future Hall of Famer. But I do think that there is genuine concern by the Cowboys organization about Tony Romo's health, period. They like him as a human. This is almost getting to the point where, is this okay?
Right.
morally to continue going down this path. And if you're already 10 weeks in, because it keeps saying 6 to 10, and again, if it takes longer, that means at 36, I'm gonna hedge the bets that it's 10, not 6, because he's not young and he's had so many injuries. So I just feel like until we hear something mid-season, there's just no reason for him to be on your roster.
Yeah, and again, it's a combo of we don't know when he's going to come back, and there's just a lot of other options out there. I mean, even when he was healthy, it's not like I think a lot of people were drafting him as their quarterback one. I mean, he was a good upside quarterback too, but certainly not a slam dunk. So, all right, well, let's get to another injury that happened this week, and a little lesser profile, but still has some ramifications for the fantasy world. Ben Watson tore his Achilles. It wasn't a pretty injury. Out for the season after signing that free agent contract. I mean, look, by all accounts, he was the starter, and he was going to get the bulk of the attention there in that offense, at least at that position, and now that goes out the window. So we've got Crockett Gilmore as the current starter. You've still got Max Williams, the second-year tight end, lurking, and then who knows, maybe Dennis Pitta makes an appearance for a couple games. So, Mike, let's start with you. Who are you taking from that three-headed monster known as the Baltimore tight end position?
Crockett Gilmore is the one for me. Last year he was playing actually really, really well. I think actually Crockett Gilmore is one of the guys that went extremely undervalued this offseason. When they signed Ben Watson, it was mind-boggling to me. And I don't remember what podcast it was, but last week I said something to the fact that Ben Watson would not even finish as the top tight end in Baltimore as a fantasy option. I really felt that. I didn't.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, I know. I'm not saying it. I'm not like, ooh, he got injured. I'm right. I felt like even if he was healthy the whole year, I don't think there was any way that he kept Crockett Gilmore off the field. If you go back and look at Crockett Gilmore last year while he was on the field, he averaged almost 5 targets a game. He had 46 yards, and he scored 4 touchdowns in the 9 full games he played. He has a rapport with Joe Flacco because he was injured around the same time that Flacco was. He's got another year experience in the Trestman system. He understands it. Max Williams is no concern to me, and I'll tell you why. He had a chance to step up when Crockett Gilmore got hurt last year, and Max Williams was the biggest disappointment. I actually was looking forward to seeing him on the field as the tight end one. He did not impress me at all. It's going to take him some time. Sometimes it does take tight ends a little bit longer to kind of come to life in the NFL, and I think Max Williams is a walking testament to that. Most people don't know, Max Williams actually had 1 more target than Crockett Gilmore last year, but he had 150 less yards and 3 less touchdowns. It just goes to show that Crockett Gilmore was much more productive when he got targets. And I'm buying him as a low-end tight end too. He's a streamer at best, but at the same time, he is the clear-cut tight end that I would want to own if you're going to own any Baltimore tight end.
Brandon, what about you?
I don't want any of them on my fantasy team. I'm not taking any of them as sleepers until I see something. I will say that Max Williams just turned 22 only 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. So he's one of the youngest players in the National Football League, and rookie tight ends are never productive. That is something you can write down in pen. You don't even need to use a pen. It doesn't happen. So, yes, he got those targets, what have you. But again, Joe Flacco got hurt. The whole team got hurt. My real concern here is really about Baltimore in general. Also, they spent a second-round pick on Max Williams. They are invested in him. He's not going away. So the fact that he did get more targets than Crockett Gilmore actually makes me a little more unsettled than settled in him based on how young he was. But I will say, my real concern is that, again, they're hit with the injury bug. Joe Flacco, still what's going on with this guy? I don't think he's 100% okay. Steve Smith Sr., are we going to see him? What's going on with Steve Smith Sr.?
They're saying he's going to play. They're saying he's going to play. I don't know how good he'll be or how ready he'll be. I don't trust Steve Smith with a 10-foot pole.
Right, and then Kenneth Dixon was taken off the field. Now, supposedly he's back again, but I think that almost everyone's health is tenuous right now, and the only person, oddly enough, that I'm drafting is Kamar Aiken because he seems to be the only guy who can stay on the field and be productive. It's sad.
Mike Wallace.
Oh,
well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit.
We got to talk about Mike Wallace. We got to talk about that.
Well, and I think I think the lesson here also is I don't know that people should have expected what Ben Watson did last year to happen in Baltimore, right?
No way.
I mean, he saw 100 targets. He was a top 8 tight end or whatever it was. And yes, even if he was the starter in Baltimore, it's not like I don't know where this perception that they relied on tight end heavily came from, right? Last year, between Gilmore and Max Williams, Baltimore's offense had 95 targets for those tight ends between the two of them, not even one. So it just I don't know where that thinking came from, but whether it was Watson or Crockett, Gilmore, or Max Williams, I don't know that any of them can be trusted at this point. I think I'm with you, Brandon. And Mike, you probably agree too that if you don't have to pick any of them, you won't.
Believe me, my stance was more in the fact if I had to pick one, it would be Crockett Gilmore. But yeah, like I said, he's at the bottom of the tight end 2 barrel, more of a streaming option than anything.
Right. I think we're all in agreement on that. Okay. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will get into all of the preseason action with our winners and losers. All right, welcome back. We are going to talk about a very eventful Week 3 that happened this last weekend, and you've probably heard this term 1,000 times, but it was the dress rehearsal for most of these players. So a lot of times the only time they will play in the preseason before they get ready for the regular season. And we are going to get into a couple of winners, a couple of losers, and see how that bodes for the regular season. So first up, let's just go by position. At quarterback, we had Russell Wilson turn in, a very, I would say, good preseason. He finished with 303 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think this was yours, Brandon, right? You were very high on Russell Wilson, his preseason.
Yes, it's exactly what I needed to see. Everyone's like, oh, they didn't play, they didn't score a touchdown the first 2 games. Yeah, I don't care about the first 2 games of preseason. And really, that was about them figuring out what they had in Christian Michael, to be entirely honest. That seemed to be the only thing they were doing. Yeah. I actually think they're going to rely on the pass a lot more than people thought. I was saying this before. This is why I'm okay with Doug Baldwin. And even, Tyler Lockett in those boom or bust, best ball leagues is perfect. Definitely a great daily option. Jermaine Kearse is coming up. They're also using their tight ends quite a bit, which makes me think that they're priming themselves for if Jimmy Graham comes back, they do have the plays in place for him. If you watched Russell Wilson, when he was under pressure, he rolled out. He did exactly what we always love. He passed the ball on the run. Beautiful passes. Sure, there were a couple mistakes. It's still a preseason game. But as far as that's concerned, I loved what I saw from him. And, for me, he's definitely one of the guys that I feel very confident. If you are someone that's, wants to take a quarterback earlier, he's the one I'm taking before everyone else, frankly.
Yeah. Mike, are you taking Russell Wilson early?
No, he's so good. I don't really take any quarterbacks early, but if they fall like some industry leagues, I do own Russell Wilson in 2 industry leagues because, as you guys know, industry leagues quarterbacks tend to fall a lot. And if Russell Wilson's there in the late 5th, early 6th round, 100%, I'll take Russell Wilson there all day.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like you said, Brandon, it's just confirming what we thought about Russell Wilson, which is he's really good. I mean, he didn't do anything
good at football.
Good at football. Okay, right. We will get into the other stuff. That's a whole different thing. So
I will say, though, I think that a lot of people thought they'd go back to the run all the time. I don't think so. The way, again, he's such an efficient passer, they are going to continue doing it when the defense gives them the opportunity. He's so good at reading defenses and making it count. And so I'm fine with him. I think that the fear that he's all of a sudden going to never throw the ball again because they're going to get back to this ground and pound, and Doug Baldwin said he wasn't going to get as many targets. Doug Baldwin doesn't know what the play calling is right now. You do you. Get Russell Wilson if you're into that.
Well, and I think, and this pains me as a 49er fan, but the Seahawks coaching the franchise, they know what they're doing, and they're very good, I think, at playing to their strengths. So when Marshawn Lynch was there in his prime, that was their strength. There was no doubt about it. You just give it to him and let him do his thing. And look, that bought Russell Wilson some time, let's face it, to become this great quarterback where they didn't have to rely on him 100% that early, but now they probably realize, hey, he's pretty good. We can rely on him more, and that's what we're going to do. And look, it's just a shift, meaning, hey, they might not rely on the run game as much, but that's okay. That lets Rawls and Christian Michael sort of be, very efficient in their a decreased time that they might have, and Russell Wilson gets to do his thing because they're going to rely on him more. So, I'm looking forward to the pass game because, look, I think they realize they've got a good thing, so why not just pound it into the ground? Anyway, all right, let's get to a running back that, Mike, you wanted to talk about, Mr. Gio Bernard, who looked pretty good last night. I mean, he was pretty spry moving around there against Jacksonville.
No, he did look really good, and the thing is, that's why I wanted to talk about him, is because, you look at the Cincinnati offense, and a lot of people say it's got to be Gio Bernard or it's got to be Jeremy Hill. It can be both of them. If they go back to the way that they were in 2014, in the way they were in 2014, you could expect 400 carries between them two combined. You could expect 100 targets divvied up between them. And so you have to be encouraged when you saw Gio Bernard last night lined up as a wide receiver, and it was a beautiful thing. The screen that they ran with him, it worked out to a T, exactly how they would have wanted it. Jeremy Hill's running fine. Like, don't worry about Jeremy Hill, but Gio Bernard, he's never going to be that workhorse. But if they're starting to use him in more like exotic packages and lining up as a wide receiver more often, you gotta love that, because I think he's a better receiver more than anything. And that's where he's going to make up that ground where Jeremy Hill scores most of the touchdowns in the red zone. Or Gio Bernard being used as a receiver, loved seeing it. And he's looked perfectly fine this preseason. Like I said, I don't ever think you're going to see Gio Bernard getting more than 160 carries. I don't think he's built to handle more than that. But seeing him as a receiver was very encouraging for his draft prospects.
Well, and look, he might be the second best receiver on that team right now. That's healthy anyway.
Yep.
Brandon, what about you? What were your impressions on Gio?
We always think of him as a PPR guy, and that is, technically true, but he was 21st in standard leagues as far as fantasy points and 17th in PPR. The difference actually wasn't as great as you thought. I actually went through all of the lists and looked at how much people varied from PPR to standard. And you know what? Less than, in fact, it is 41% of running backs vary 5 or more spots in PPR, but it's less than 20% of wide receivers and less than 10% of tight ends, more than 5 spots. So it's interesting. The high volume passes, but for Giovanni Bernard, I feel like this year they're going to go back to the more passing. I loved seeing him, line up outside. So, Matt Forte did that as well. I like seeing that for the guys that we do want to bump up in PPR. That's actually special. That's what makes those guys special. So it was nice to see.
Well, and let's get to another former PPR All-Star, we'll say, Arian Foster, who saw some action in Week 3. I think this was one of yours, Brandon. His stat line wasn't great, but I don't think that was the point. I think people just wanted to make sure that he got out there and stayed out there and left on his own power, right?
Well, the stat lines weren't bad. I mean, considering the fact that the Miami Dolphins looked terrible until Arian Foster went in there and did his thing. Literally, I think he's the best player on the team. I mean that quite literally. I think that he is going to be the best player on the team. Now, he's a 5th-round pick with first-round talent when he's on the field. So to me, it's already baked in that I don't think he's going to play all 16 games. I'm okay with that. Like, to me, he hasn't gone up or down in ADP. He's still in the 5th round. If you're someone that has, you took 3 wide receivers and you want to take a tight end or, have Arian Foster be your running back 1 until someone comes off waivers, I'm fine with that. I don't have any problem with that. I thought that the guy looked great at football again, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what I need, and I just know that I'm going to need someone else, and that's with Jay Ajayi getting a ton of touches. So that's what I like to see. And again, what he did do on the field when he was there was great. These preseason game stat lines are based off of experimenting and 1/2. So sometimes, if you're just looking at it, it looks a little funky. But Arian Foster looked very fresh, way fresher than I thought he would look.
Well, Jay Ajayi, though, so the part that's concerning for me is that Ajayi got the start in this game. And I know like Foster came on shortly thereafter, but Ajayi's starting tells me that they want to try and establish the run. And Ajayi, as much as I don't want to say it, Arian Foster hasn't been very good running the ball the last 2 years. Last year, 2.6 yards per carry. That was an all-time low for him. And granted, it wasn't as big a sample size as I would like to see. But, the start of this preseason, 7 carries for 5 yards doesn't help matters. It doesn't help me feel any better. I think Arian Foster looks a little bit bigger than I remember him in Houston. He moved a little bit slower. But the part where Arian Foster brings a different dynamic to this offense is out of the backfield, catching the ball. That's what he does. Like, that's where the Dolphins are going to use him. That's where he should make his money. Like, he's just so smart when it comes to how he runs his routes, when to pull out, when to stay in and block. He's smart in that way. The reason that you can hang your hat on Arian Foster and why I like him a tad better than Jay Ajayi is that Miami's defense is awful. Like really, really bad. Like, not even close to a good thing, like all bad. And you have to figure that Miami is going to be down in quite a few games, especially looking at their early schedule. You know, I've talked about this quite a few times. They're at Seattle, they're at New England, then they play the Browns, and then they are at Cincinnati. So that's not a good start to the season. So you figure they're going to be down in those games. Therefore, Arian Foster should be on the field for a majority of the time. I think he's a sell high after that, just because, you know, you are worried about the injury concerns. And once game script starts going more towards Dolphins winning games, that's when you're going to start seeing less and less of Arian Foster at this point in his career. So I like Foster as a PPR option. I think he's one that will see a huge uptick in PPR leagues. But man, it really was worrisome to see him not start the game because he was playing. You know, if he wasn't playing, it is what it is. But the fact that Foster was playing and he seemed to be healthy out there, the fact that Ajayi started tells me a little bit about what the Dolphins want to do.
See, I think Ajayi, though, he had 15 carries for 36 yards. Yeah, it's not like it was better.
No. Yeah,
you know, the problem is he only has one job and he can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and Arian Foster at least gets 20 yards on 2 catches.
Yeah, and I think the theme here is overall the Dolphins just don't look good, and it affects every part of the. Honestly, it affects every position. I mean, if you're not good, it's a what's the word? It's where the positions help each other out. It's, you know, cooperative, whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, it could be a concern. I mean, honestly, not just for the running game, but for the receiving game and Tannehill. We could probably spend a whole podcast talking about that, but we won't. Don't worry.
He's looked good though. He has looked good. Don't dismiss Tannehill. He's looked good. My guy.
All right.
One game.
Okay.
He has looked good with the
other two. He looked terrible. Well, I mean.
All right. Let's get to receivers. Let's get to Mike. You mentioned Dorial Green-Beckham. After the trade to Philadelphia, there was some question on where he would fit in. Like, you know, they're still Jordan Matthews. They're still giving Nelson Aguilar some time. But look, Green-Beckham looked pretty good. He caught a touchdown this weekend. So are we buying him?
Well, they just went out and they cut Ruben Randall, and then they also cut Chris Gibbons. So Green-Beckham's roster spot is safe. You know, they wouldn't have traded for him if they didn't think that they could get something out of him. And honestly, it was a mixed bag this week, and it wasn't all pretty. You know, there was one pass where he lost the ball. He didn't even know where the heck it was. And then there was the other one that was pretty. The reason that I told people if you don't add Dorial Green-Beckham into your projections, you're doing something wrong, because he would be inserted into that offense in the goal line package, regardless of how fast or slow he picks up an offense. That guy belongs in on the goal line. He can high point a ball with the best receivers in the league, and he's so young. It's going to take time. I'm not buying him in redraft. I don't think that he's like an option that you want, but he is someone to keep an eye on in dynasty leagues if you can get him for dirt cheap right now. Green-Beckham, like I said, he's just a threat in the red zone. And if they use him specifically as that, that's fine. But one wide receiver that I do want to make it a point to talk about while we're on the show, Mike Evans. You know, he was someone that I talked so bad about for the first couple of years of his career, and I was never on board. But after watching and coming around, I've done my research, I've looked through it. I had my coming out Mike Evans party that I believe in the guy this year, and I believe he's turned a corner. I think that Jameis Winston is a dark horse to lead the league in passing attempts under Dirk Cutter. And if you look at what Evans has done this preseason, 12 targets, that's about what he might see in a regular season game. 8 receptions, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that's with Vincent Jackson doing some work in week 3 too. So, man. I just want everybody to know that I am all in on Mike Evans this year, and if you want to draft him at the start of your second round, I have no issues with that.
Oh, I think people are drafting him at the end of the first if they can help it. But no, you're officially on record now, Mike, as being a Mike Evans fan. Don't worry, we've got
There we go. Well, I was a hater. I was once a hater. I am now a fan.
No, I know, and I was at that coming out party. It was a good party. I remember it.
Yeah.
The refreshments were delightful. Anyway. All right, so let's get to some downer news, because we do have to look at the other side of this. So some losers from week 3 of the preseason. Brandon, let's start with you. I mean, let's start with the obvious. Mark Sanchez, which let's face it, may have not been the best, before week 3. Now we just have confirmation, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting Twitter hate when I wrote about this a month ago, and I said, I think Trevor Siemian's going to be the guy.
You're on record.
I'm on record.
Remember.
I said, I'm sorry. My family's from Denver. I'm just telling you, they like this guy. And if Mark Sanchez doesn't have it like completely on lockdown when he's the only quarterback who has thrown a regular season pass in the NFL, that's a terrible sign.
It's going to be good times. It's going to be fun in Denver.
I actually don't think it's going to be that bad. I think they're going to do exactly, because Peyton Manning was so bad last year, they actually have a whole game book based on having bad quarterbacks.
Right.
No one else has that in the NFL. No, I'm dead serious. I actually think the advantage for them is the huge decline of Peyton Manning last year and the mediocre play of Brock Osweiler, who, by the way, looks a lot better in Houston.
But behind that, though, Peyton Manning was at least smart. Like, he didn't have, like, we know that his
He
skill
had more
was declining.
interceptions than touchdowns. I don't call that smart.
I know that, but that might come down to play calling as well. Like, that's part of the problem. And Siemian, the part you have to worry about is his college resume is not very good at all. And he
has no college resume. He was a backup.
That's what I'm saying. He learned from the bad Peyton Manning. So, like, that's the part with me where it's like I have a hard time getting fully on board. I understand what your point is about the whole, it can't get worse. I think it can get a little bit worse, but from what we've seen so far, it's encouraging. But like we said, it's a small sample size in the preseason. We can't take too much from it.
I think we can take that Demaryius Thomas is undervalued. Virgil Green is undervalued. Tight end.
Yeah. If you're not on, like, I took Virgil Green in the last round of that home league draft just because no one else would, and I don't know why, but they should. But let's face it, this is just they're buying time until Paxton Lynch starts, and we might as well have an over-under on the week that they actually put him in there, because that's what all this is. You don't trade up in the first round to get a quarterback and then just sit him on the bench the entire season. So.
I actually would prefer them sit him on the bench for the entire season, but they have a win-now window, so I get why they would go to him, but I prefer for quarterbacks to sit for a year before they play.
Yeah, and again, you could go either way on that. Like, you've got Aaron Rodgers, obviously, who sat for like 3 years and turned out to be awesome, but then you've got other guys that are thrown right in. Peyton Manning was thrown right in, and I think led the league interceptions his rookie year, and that turned out okay too. So, yeah.
If Denver's defense doesn't hold up, which I think it will, I think they're still going to do very well this year. Denver's defense looks really good.
Their defense is good.
No debating it. It's like, it's beautiful.
Aqib Talib might get suspended.
He'll always walk that fine line. But they don't have a bye week till week 11. So I don't think they're going to put Paxton Lynch in before week 11. So I think that Siemian...
that'd be a good bet.
And Siemian plays New Orleans in week 10.
I would be willing to bet before week 11.
I would think so, too. I would think so, too.
All right, well, let's go to who the Broncos played in Super Bowl 50, the Carolina Panthers. Mike, you had mentioned them and Cam Newton not looking great. Obviously, this isn't cause to, like, not draft Cam Newton, but what does this do for you?
No, this is the same issue with Robert Griffin III, and it's not on the same level, but I've talked about it a lot before, in that Cam Newton is one of the quarterbacks that you have to talk about, and he relies so much on confidence. And when his confidence is shot, Cam Newton turns into an awful quarterback. And you saw it happen. You saw Ron Rivera trying to push him through it. He pulled him out of the game for a series. He put him back in. He marched Cam Newton out there in the third quarter because he was like, we got to get this kid over this hump. He could not do it. Like, Cam Newton looked brutal. He looked like he regressed back 2 years to who he was then. Floating balls, like, last year he didn't have any point that was just like a major where he had to dig down deep and actually like pick himself up after playing like garbage. I'm curious to see how he bounces back from this, because Cam Newton is someone, when he's riding his confidence, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But when he's bad, he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And what we saw in week 3 was pathetic. Like, he was forcing passes. There should have been other interceptions that were dropped. Like, he looked like a quarterback that just had no confidence. So, if you're drafting Cam Newton with, a top 3, top 4 pick like he's been going in some of these drafts, I highly suggest you reconsider that, because I don't think a quarterback should go off the board until the late 5th round, early 6th round. So, man, it was brutal to watch.
Brandon, do you agree with that? Or actually, no, you wanted to talk about the Colts, another team that looked a little I don't know, not rocky, but didn't look their best in the preseason. So what does that tell you about them?
I have never had Andrew Luck ranked over 7 the entire offseason, and I think I might be too high.
Wow.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about that.
I'm not faulting you for that.
My problem from the get-go is that they have not done enough to change the situation from last season when he was bad. So it's difficult for me to see a 180 happen, especially with that offensive line. I don't know what is going on, and I'm telling you, I don't know what the coaching staff is doing recreationally on the weekends, but sometimes it blows my mind to see what they're doing. So.
Part of the reason you have to like Luck a little bit though is because their defense is so bad. And I know last year we talk about that Andrew Luck wasn't great last year. We know that, but at the same time, do you know in the games he played, he was the number 2 fantasy quarterback?
You mean last year?
Like last year, in the games that he played, like if you just sort it by the weeks that Andrew Luck played and everybody else played, he was the number 2 fantasy quarterback because it was a whole bunch of garbage time points, and that's basically what you could rely on the same thing again in 2016 because their defense is brutal and they just lost Vontae Davis for the first month of the season too. So. Yeah, there's concerns on the offensive line, and for me, that's more concerning for Frank Gore. He's going to be kept in a pass block. He's not going to be able to run behind a good offensive line, but Andrew Luck's going to throw the ball 650 times maybe. So it's bold.
I'm not getting to that. I think I'd rather have a Cam Newton with a Greg Olsen on the field, which he didn't have, than an Andrew Luck in a disaster zone that I don't understand.
I agree
intellectually.
Cam Newton, yeah. Well, Cam Newton should be your number 2 quarterback just because of the floor he presents. But I'm talking so if you say 7, that means you'd have Breeze over him, not
Easy.
not Roethlisberger, right?
I do.
You do? Yeah. So to me,
Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger, and I even have Carson Palmer up there. I think this preseason's a Trojan horse.
Oh, can we talk about Carson Palmer for a second more?
Oh, by all means, go.
By all means.
That was one player I wanted to talk about because he was another one that didn't look very good in the preseason. And honestly, if we go back and look through Carson Palmer's last 7 games, including all these preseason, Carson Palmer's been awful. The last 4 games of 2015, Carson Palmer completed just 58% of his passes, 244 yards per game. He had 7 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. This preseason, 3 interceptions, not a single touchdown. There's real concern for Carson Palmer with me. I don't know what he's doing or what's changed, but he doesn't look like the same quarterback. And you even seen it on Bruce Arians. He got in Palmer's face and over week 3 and just saying, "What the hell are you doing?" It just every single week it seems like it's just getting worse and worse. I'm waiting for him to turn the corner. He's a veteran, so I fully expect him to get back on some sort of track. But for those taking him with a top 10 quarterback pick, I'm concerned.
Okay, Brandon. Counterpoint.
He had a really tough schedule last year at the end of everything that was going on. So I guess I don't love him playing against Seattle or the Rams or Minnesota or even necessarily Green Bay, which were 4 of his last 5 games. So certainly again I don't like anyone playing against Seattle, which is why I give Dak Prescott props because the guy went in there and acted like who's Seattle. So again, I think that I don't know if it's apples to apples necessarily here. I think that it's a little bit tough. Also, in the playoffs, they're playing against good defenses again, so they leaned on their good defense. So I guess I figure they have so many weapons in the air there that either he's going to be a top 10 guy or he will no longer be the quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals. And that includes David Johnson, by the way, who's another receiver for the team. I just feel like it's either it's going to be boom or they're going to have to find something else because there's no excuse to not be a top 10 fantasy quarterback with his weapons.
Well, I would agree. I would agree that he should be, but with the way he's played recently, it's just a little concerning.
But I'll admit, I have not watched. So I thought the 1 and 2, he was just fooling with things. I didn't have any concern.
Right.
I have not been able to go back and solid watch. I was flipping. When we were watching millions of games. Yeah. But it's one of the last 3 games that I need to go back and rewatch. So I'll watch for that though. So good heads up. Probably you're right. I'm sure there's room to be concerned. But again, I just feel like it's either top 10 or he's literally not playing because I don't see any other option for him. Those weapons are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and sort of to your point, Mike, about recent history, you've got you mentioned Carson Palmer's stats the last couple games. Andrew Luck last year in 7 games, 55% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns, 12 interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So
the volume though, the volume is what's there. Like Carson Palmer,
sure, yeah.
Carson, yeah. That's no. Believe me, I'm not saying that Andrew Luck is like a god, like a top 4 quarterback in fantasy. He is just because of the volume that he presents. That's where I'm at with that. Like, believe me, I'm not standing up for Andrew Luck as like a real life quarterback right now because he hasn't played very well. But it's more on volume, and we talk about fantasy. Andrew Luck also rushes, which adds on to his value as a fantasy quarterback. But one player who I'm concerned about, I'm waiting for you guys to give it to me. It's about Torrey Smith.
Actually, Mike, I was going to let you end the episode with your Torrey Smith mea culpa. So by all means,
there's not really much of a defense that I could throw out here for the. I mean, the only thing that I could say is that Chip Kelly hasn't thrown to any of the starting wide receivers. Like Quentin Patton has 3 targets, no catches. Bruce Ellington had 1 target, no catches before he got hurt. And then Torrey Smith has had 1 target on 50 snaps. Like, they've targeted the tight ends a whole lot. Between Brent Selleck and Vance McDonald, they have 14 targets between those two. So I don't know if it's like, let's see which one of these two will emerge as a starter, because there's been real talk that Garrett Selleck might be the starter there. And that would kind of poo-poo on everybody that thinks that Vance McDonald breakout year. I still think it's McDonald, but the only thing I can hang my hat on is that the starting wide receivers combined have seen 5 targets. But it is a concern to see nothing, to see no chemistry there. Like, I don't know what's going on in San Francisco. You figure
it's Chip called Kelly, Blaine Gabbert, Mike. That's the problem.
It is a problem. I mean, Colin Kaepernick's an issue himself, and honestly, it's his quarterback play was atrocious. Like, he shouldn't even be in the conversation. Look at Driscoll. Give him a shot. Like, if Blaine Gabbert's that bad, I guess we're looking at Driscoll as a possible. And when it's gotten really bad, when I think that when Mark Sanchez is about to get cut, I'm thinking, well, I wonder if Chip should just grab him off the waiver wire once that kind of falls through, because he's going to get cut.
No, I thought that too. With 100%. All that's going on there, I thought, oh, that's a perfect person to just be there and hold the clipboard and guide Jeff Driscoll on his way until they eventually draft Deshaun Watson next year, which we all know is happening. Brandon, what do you think about Torrey Smith and just the offense in general? Pretty much what Mike said.
Yeah. Well, my whole thing against Torrey Smith is that he's the deep threat guy, and neither of these guys can throw deep. So that was always my problem. And Chip Kelly is just insane. I was a Chip Kelly hopeful when he came into the league. I think that what we have seen in the preseason is atrocious, and borderline he should get fired before week 6. No, I think the fact that, like he said, 5 targets for the 3 starting wide receivers. They're not even practicing. They're not even figuring out what they have. I have no idea what they're doing. And don't get all cute Moneyball with me. Hugh Jackson's doing Moneyball in Cleveland, and we're seeing him actually try things. Mm-hmm. Now, is it always perfect? No, but we can see that there's turns going on in there. There's like a machine and a brain and happening. Whereas Chip, I have no idea what he's doing. And I think that, again, what I love about what Mike has done today and what we're all doing really is that this is reality. Again, we all made well-researched calls. These weren't, no one here is, an idiot who just talks out of whatever. But things change. And unfortunately, Chip Kelly has made the San Francisco 49ers so unpredictable that even my saying taking Bruce Ellington as your last round picks feels risky. Literally your last round pick, I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I think that, if you are listening to someone who analyzes fantasy football who has made 0 changes in their opinions in the last week, you should not listen to them, because things happen. The world keeps turning, and I think it's important that we recognize that. That's part of our job. So congrats to Mike for being like, you know what, Mike Evans is awesome and Torrey Smith, meh. And I think that's the analysis we need right there. Hard-hitting analysis.
There you go. Well, and just I'll end on this very, very sour note. The 49ers quarterbacks in the Green Bay game, 9 of 20, 61 yards passing, 4.1 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and sacked 3 times. So,
well, that's better than my Bears, so.
Well, is it? Is it?
I don't know.
It's not.
You know what? I'm actually more into Alshon Jeffrey than I was earlier, because Kevin White's really terrible.
Oh,
I don't know if that's good or bad. I shouldn't say that, but I think Kevin White is more of a work in progress than I thought he was.
Yep.
So I will say I'm a little bit less worried about Alshon as I was a month ago. Speaking of things where you're like, yeah, I've kind of changed my mind on that. I think
look, they have an established quarterback and an established receiver. And look, I think to your point, Brandon, with Cleveland and the 49ers, in Chip's defense, every player to a T on Cleveland offensively is better than their counterpart in San Francisco to a T. Quarterback, running back, you could argue is about the same, but the receivers and honestly the tight ends, let's face it, in Cleveland are going to be better than the ones in San Francisco.
Oh, Gary's beautiful.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So that's not to say that Chip shouldn't be a little more adventurous, but at the same time, his personnel is not great, and it just makes things difficult when guys can't make plays on their own. Because that's what they're going to be doing all offseason or all regular season is they're going to have to fend for themselves pretty much.
I would agree with you, except for that Mike just made the point that they've only targeted their starters 5 times. How do they know if they're good? I don't know. I have no idea how these people play, especially together.
They miss on 55% of their pass attempts. Hey, hold on. That they would get them there anyway.
And on top of that, they just traded for Jeremy Curley from the Lions, so their starters, including Curley, if we include him because Bruce Ellington's hurt now, they still have 5 targets. We're in a bad spot at our 49ers Truthers meetings. We're in big trouble.
Yeah.
I just feel like even if you have bad players, let's say that they're all really bad, you still have to target them. What are you doing?
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if it's part of Chip Kelly's master plan. I mean, here's the thing: if it goes into week 1 and Torrey Smith sees fewer than 5 targets. Yeah, that's alert like all over the place. Like if this is something that Chip Kelly's doing to disguise the offense, to not give away, some of the changes he's making, I don't know. It has me concerned. I'm not even going to lie about that. But if Torrey Smith doesn't see at least 5 targets in week 1, there's a real problem.
Ooh, I might make that bet with you, Mike, but we'll discuss.
Yeah, I don't think he'll have 5 either. Yeah, Chip Kelly.
It'll
wow.
be 2-on-1. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, that will do it for the end of this very Debbie Downer part of the Fantasy Slant podcast. But it will be much better on the next episode, I assure you. We'll look ahead towards week 4 of the preseason, the final game before the real action starts. So for Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Mike Tagliere, I'm Michael Moore, and this has been the Fantasy Slant.